What's up, Tyler?
How's it going? Thanks
Good,
for having
man.
us.
No, thanks for making the trip out, dude. And I know it's a long. I know you got a lot going on right now, so awesome having you out here. And thank you for the tour yesterday.
Absolutely. You guys are always welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Charlie, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you guys. Thank you so much for having me out.
Yeah, for sure. You guys just had your 7-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Guess we did.
Yep.
That's
7
awesome.
years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
No, touring you guys' spot. It's one of the nicest facilities I've ever been in. You guys have a gym and an in-house chef. Can you talk about how the gym got started?
It's all about productivity, man, right? So the more we could stay on site, the more things that we could do that kind of adapt into our everyday lifestyle, the less we leave, the less we kind of stay together, right? That's kind of the concept of eating together every day. Michael King, the founder of the company, is basically a professional athlete, right? We all just try to keep up. So he wanted the gym on site, and he takes his hobbies very seriously. So that's what you get. You get a boxing ring and a gym.
Right
I
on.
think COVID had a little something to do with that
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, yeah.
As soon as the gym started closing down and everything, changed, the gym instantly popped up in the shop.
And it's grown a little every time, every month.
Yeah,
Something's
yeah.
added, right? And
Every week.
we end up in a different sport or whatever, but
Yeah,
I mean,
saw
every time I come out, there's a new piece of equipment, or
Yeah.
it's expanding.
Yeah.
I guess another wall's coming down to push it out even more.
some things are shifting around a little bit. Yeah.
We had an original agreement that was for call it like 500 square feet at max. Mike said, "Could I just carve out this one little
I was looking like
kind of
3,000
section over
square
here?"
feet.
And we're like, "Yeah, no problem. That's fine." Every week it's grown more
Nice.
and more.
We've justified it, though, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Charlie, what's your role at King's Garden? Can you introduce yourself and what's your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, certainly. So my name's Charlie Kieley. I'm the founder, one of the founders, and COO, Chief Operating Officer. I'm more or less responsible for all of the day-to-day operations. So my background is cannabis. I've been in this space, I guess you'd call me a legacy guy, if that's the term that seems to be appropriate now that everyone's using. So been in the space, been growing cannabis for 20 years now. Born and raised in the Coachella Valley, and went to Orange County to go to college after high school. Spent a couple of years there. That's where I got my first experience with commercial grows, set up a grow in Costa Mesa. And then in Westminster, California in 2003, set up a dispensary and ran that for about a year and a half. Ultimately ended up selling off the dispensary and the grow to move to Willits, California. Bought a ranch up off of Third Gate Road in the Sherwood community up off of in Willits. And spent the next 7 years there just growing with a couple of good friends, good partners. And basically just evolved that one ranch in Willits into a couple thousand acres spread out between Laytonville, Kenton Palm, the Ruth Lake area. So did that for several years. Got a little tired and lonely up in the hills. Anyone who's spent enough time up there knows how that goes. Saw an opportunity in Palm Springs, my hometown. The city was being pretty proactive. They were speaking and starting the dialogue as it relates to licensing, obviously all medical at this time. So I came back home to have some conversations with some people I knew, and one thing led to another, and my efforts and attention kind of shift to opening indoors in my hometown, the desert. Not too long after that became my focus. I linked up with Mike King through a friend of a friend, not even a friend, but through an acquaintance, one of those, 7 people removed type of situations. We ended up in the same building, had a good conversation, realized that we were both on the same mission to do the same thing. He had a financial background, access to capital. I had the cultivation and cannabis experience. And so it was that minute that this relationship was formed. It wasn't King's Garden or anything at that time. It was just a partnership and a common goal. So we set out to, achieve greatness in the cannabis space. It was very quickly after that. I had known Tyler, one of the grows I was consulting for in Palm Springs. Tyler was running successful indoor operations in Palm Springs. We were kind of neighbors in a sense. We ended up in the same building. And so, he was one of the first people to come onto the team. We recognized his skill set and his value. And so, he was one of the first ones to come onto the team. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
No, you guys, that's awesome to hear that you've come from the traditional market and know the background, because a lot of the times you're seeing a lot of people come in just with capital and no background. So you're one of the original founders.
Yeah.
With you are the original founder.
Me and Mike King are the two original founders. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And to your point, like there's a ton of people coming into the space that don't have anything other than capital. They are a threat, obviously, for their own reasons, but at the end of the day, without the ability to grow a good product and consistently produce, just having the capital will never get you to the finish line.
100%.
But I also think, you guys have built King's Garden on quality product, hands down. I mean, no influencers, no, crazy partnerships with anybody famous. You guys just done it from good quality cannabis.
Well, that was the goal. Sorry, I let Tyler jump in too, but that was the goal originally. I recognized that there was this huge misconception that you could not grow good quality cannabis at scale, right? This is like a misnomer that's been thrown around for so long. And I saw it when I was up on the hill. I saw it when I lived up there for years and experienced, what I was a new grower, quote unquote, chatting with people who had been in the hills for 20, 30, 40 years. And if you asked any of them, the general rule or the general consensus was that there was no way you could ever grow, good quality cannabis at scale. It just wasn't feasible. And I recognize that statement just to be so flawed, just on the principle. And you don't have to look very far to recognize that, like, any agricultural product, not any, but as far as I'm aware, any that I've encountered so far, it is scalable.
Yeah.
Is it easy? No. Is there a right and a wrong way to do it? Absolutely. But is it scalable? Like, yes, absolutely. And that was the mission we set out to prove, was that we could, in fact, stay true to our roots of producing good cannabis, not just in a 100 or 200 or 300 light facility, but in a 3,000 light operation and growing from there.
Tyler, what about you? How did you get into the industry, and what's your background?
Yeah, so I moved out to California from Florida, my hometown, in 2011. So I just recently broke my 10 years of being in the industry. I had an opportunity with some family. My cousin was running you call it on the traditional market, at the time, a large-scale co-op. I didn't know what I was moving out for at the time, who I was going to be working with, what I was going to be doing. I just remember my first day walking in the grow, seeing all the umbrella HID lighting and kind of hopping in first day, right? I worked my way from the bottom. One thing led to another, having to move, getting, closed down left and right. Ended up in the desert, Palm Springs, like Charlie said, in a neighboring facility. Him and I kind of, in the team that he was with, kind of shared a lot of the same genetics and tech and just growing methods and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we met. Timing, right place, right time, being connected to the right people is how I ended up meeting Mike as well. And when they had an opportunity to launch something on the recreational legal side, that's when they called me and joined their team instantly.
What's your day-to-day at King's? What is your role?
Yeah, so I'm the head cultivator. I oversee all 3,500 flowering lights. We have currently 42 employees underneath me. Every single one of our facilities has a respective manager on site that I talk with daily, weekly, monthly, basically sending them templates, schedules, and things of that nature to keep every facility on track with our growing methods and to keep everything on the same cycle. So my goal is to look at all 10 of our operations as one facility, right? It doesn't matter. There's 50 something grow rooms, but they're all under one company and one brand. So I have to run those as if it's in one operation, right? So we have like a floating team, and we use kind of centralizing things as like kind of a superpower to us, right? It's how we can remain efficient in a lot of ways. So at standard, say, call it 1,000 light facility for us, only has 5 full-time employees on site, because there's a lot of times that I don't need 15, 20 people there. But there's, big harvests or buck downs or green work that needs to happen, deleafing or things of that nature, where I have to direct a large crew, to one facility or to the next to, accomplish every single goal every single week. So it's a per day and a per week kind of scheduling that I stick to. On top of that, it's the standard troubleshooting that every grower needs to know how to do, how to identify a product, a problem like a mechanical failure or things of that nature, have the approach to be able to fix it correctly or know when there's something wrong. So things like that. So I'm on site at every single facility, most of the time, at least once a day at every building, kind of just driving around. Now that we're expanding.
How many buildings do you have?
10. So one of them is a thank you, a nursery mother room. The other 9 are cultivation facilities. So all different shapes and sizes. Some of our facilities are as small as 220 lights, and some of them are as large as 1,000 lights. The new ones that we have coming online, we have 2,000 light ground up operations being built in Palm Springs right now, and then a 4,000 light operation being built in San Bernardino. With those things, like Charlie was saying, you need to find a way to become scalable at an easier cost, right? So boots on the ground for somebody like me every single day, 7 days a week, is going to be a little bit harder. So that's when we're going to get a little bit more fine-tuned with kind of the mechanical side of things that we're implementing, more facility controls, irrigation controls, fertigation controls, where I can tap in with remote access and kind of guide our team and give them the resources and tools necessary to be able to succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Because it's going to be harder for me to kind of be spread out. Right.
Yeah. Charlie, you said you had 3,500 lights going right now. What does the expansion look like, and how many lights are you guys have in the plans?
So yeah, 3,500 lights flowering right now. All of those are in the Coachella Valley. So they're within, like, let's say a 5 to 10 mile bubble of each other. The expansion that Tyler mentioned right now, in Palm Springs, kind of an expansion of one of our existing facilities, is an additional 4,000 lights. That's already broken ground. The grading has begun. They're starting to do all the underground now. So, and then in addition to that, we have currently under construction a project in San Bernardino that's another 4,000 lights. So once San Bernardino, the Palm Springs expansion comes on, there's an additional 8,000 that's going to add to the 3,500 that we have right now. So we'll be at 11,500.
Holy shit.
a lot of lights. And so that's why, to Tyler's point, when you asked him what he does, it's everything. But I think like the biggest thing, so obviously SOPs are what allow you to scale, right?
Yeah.
So having very, very, very strict and concise and clear SOPs so that everybody knows exactly what they do when they do it, right? We're not trying to, we don't hire like for quote unquote seasoned like master growers, right? We hire people who fit the kind of family vibe that we got going on, and who are trainable and smart enough to understand like, this is how we do things. This is why we do it. Is there more than one way to do things? Absolutely, right? But this is our way, and we have to stay true to our way. These are the SOPs that we've written. This is what has allowed us to scale. Our success is dependent on following those SOPs. So once you have those SOPs and they're so clear and they're so concise, it's the rinse and repeat, right? Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So what Tyler has done just phenomenally, which is probably one of the actual hardest tasks to do, is effectively just schedule and manage what's happening on what days. We know that at this point we de-leaf. We know that at this point we, clone. We know that at this point, but making sure that that's what's happening when you actually have that many facilities going on, and using that floating crew that's our kind of like migrant workforce that just moves from facility to facility, making sure that they're at the right place at the right day doing the right task. Like the scheduling has to be like precise, right? Absolute precision. And so that's a big part of what he does. He's the head cultivator, and so he's responsible for, everything as it relates to cultivation, including like getting these workers to the right place and getting them doing the right tasks. And that's not easy.
No. And then with those SOPs and the foundation that you guys created, I'm assuming you guys have the ability to kind of bring, talent up through your operations, and you're developing people based on knowledge that you've learned. So instead of hiring like a guy that's been growing weed for 10, 20 years or whatever, you're able to take a brand new guy and kind of develop
move them
him,
through
right?
the ranks. Yeah. And we do that. Most of our managers are people who, or all of them really, are people who have started at lower positions and moved their way up. And some of the best workers that we have in the organization, period, like packaging managers and trimming managers and stuff like that, are people who started at the most entry level position, either in packaging or in trimming or in the cultivation team, just doing, the floating crew work. So everybody has a shot, right?
Yeah.
Show your worth, show your ability to just follow basic, workflow stuff, and you definitely have it. And with all of the expansion that's coming in, Tyler reiterates that to these guys all the time. Like, there's a lot of management positions opening up. There's a lot of, vertical movement that can happen here shortly as these new facilities come on. So do your duty. And
Nice. Tyler, I'm assuming you're the one developing these people. What do you look for in someone? What qualities do you look for in someone as you're bringing them up through the ranks?
Yeah, that's a good question. To Charlie's point, like, we hire everybody entry level, right? So nobody really in the company besides myself and a few others, which I think I just got lucky because, to Charlie's point, we're not hiring people that are skilled cultivators already, right? Because we want to be able to groom them to do things the way that we like to do them. Not saying that it's the only way or the right way, it's the way that works for us. And for us, we don't want you testing out things in our facilities, right? So I'd almost rather have somebody with little to no experience that I can groom. And what we're looking for is family values, right? We're very big on that. We need to be able to work well together. We need to be able to get along. And you need to be able to take direction and follow notes. And like, what I'm doing on the back end of things is I'm trying to give the growers in the buildings as much data and like scheduling as I possibly can. So I'm not looking at myself as the train anymore, right? I can't physically be in there operating dosatrons or irrigation skids and things of that nature. I can't do it anymore. I look at myself more as like the train tracks, right? I'm trying to guide everybody to success by just like, here is our way of doing it, right? Yeah. Now with the big change of implementing Athena and all of that stuff, everything's kind of changed and we've had to switch SOPs and that stuff, but only to our benefit.
Yeah.
Right?
Alex, how did you worked with these guys? I mean, you guys don't make a lot of changes, and I respect that, and I'm all about that. But to make a change from, how many bottles were you guys using before?
16 different bottles at one time, yeah.
16
8 at one time.
Yeah, not at once,
yeah.
obviously, but like through this growing cycle, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a dumbed down, like, that was what I had come up with, that to be more simple than some of these, full lines that we were seeing, right? Like, we've tried it all. I've tried the full line of Advanced and Connoisseur this, and I mean, we tried it all. We've always wanted, thank you guys for finally doing it. We've always wanted, a more basic and simple way. And I knew, I guess I probably left out that I did, for a small period when I moved to Orange County, I was working at a nursery, and I got kind of plugged into the that world,
the agriculture
side of things. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot there that kind of transferred over, obviously. But one of the things I picked up on pretty quickly was that we were all being misled. We were all being taken advantage of, not necessarily misled, but taken advantage of by these nutrient companies, right? The idea that somebody had finally formulated something that was, for cannabis, and so we had to use this or that. And if you understood NPKs and what just alone, if you understood what those 3 numbers meant, you already were off to a better start. And then if you understood, the idea that there's only so many ingredients to make those numbers up, and there's only so many sources for these ingredients and stuff to begin with, you started to recognize that, like, there was way too many products being marketed just for the sole purpose of exploiting us from our funds.
Yep.
And so I tried it all. I tried Veg Bloom when that was, like a thing early on. And in hopes that like finally somebody had mastered this salt thing, right? So we always knew that I always knew deep down that somebody would be able to figure out something that was more basic. But that 16 bottle system was dumbed down, right? That was like leaving out a lot of the other rubbish. It was like, what we believed was important in those times, our beneficials, our base, our beneficials, some boosters and stuff like that. Some silica, like it was all the things that we had been trained to think that that was what we needed. So anyways, that's I guess a thank you to you guys finally.
Thank you to Alex over here.
Yeah.
No, just here trying to steer them in the right direction and make it simple. I mean, that's really what it is simplifying the whole process at scale. That's what it is.
So our trial run was small, right? We did, to your point, we don't just dive right in and make changes.
It was a slow process. It's been 2 years.
Yeah, but I don't think the trial run. The trial run didn't go perfectly the first time, right, Tyler?
No, you know what? So to Charlie's point, he did a really good job formulating our original recipe by taking like all of his favorite products from all these different brands, right? So whether it be Botanicare, House and Garden, this and that, it was a plethora of other things. It got us to where we were at today. Could we have continued to scale with that and produce what we were doing with that? Sure. But it wouldn't have been scalable at an easy cost by any means. That many changes throughout the plant's life, pulling this, adding that.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, a lot of different doser stations. Now you're talking about, single source bacillus with like beneficial bacteria and then feeding them sugars. Now we're in the world where we have to recollect all of our water and strip it of everything and reuse it. So that became a huge learning curve for us.
Cleanliness is a huge part of your guys' advantage.
For scale.
Oh, for sure.
For scale, you have to have
100%. Yeah.
Sterile.
Yeah.
So we were successful with what we had, but the first day, a good friend of ours, Chris Lundgren, great friend of ours, we do a lot of stuff together. Dosatron Chris, everybody knows him by. He said, "Hey,"
he actually just called me while we're on this podcast.
Oh yeah, that's funny. Shout out Chris. Yeah. He called me one day and said, "Hey, I got a couple buddies in town. I think Rob was supposed to be there, but he couldn't make it. But Brent and Alex, I just want you to meet these guys, right?" And so they came by the shop, and immediately Alex was like, "You got CalMag deficiencies, right?"
Damn, Alex, just like that, bro. Just go in and start talking beef for one.
Well, I see what I see, and it's easy.
But that day, we sat down in the office and recognized, and Charlie, put this really well when having this conversation was, we're not really open to changing much, but if we're gonna test those waters with anybody, it's gonna be with you guys, right? Because you guys put in the work on the back end with the R&D specific to what we're trying to accomplish here, right? Yeah. It's not another nutrient bottle that's just like, hey, buy all these things, you're gonna get 30% more and yada yada, which is like, when has that ever been true, right?
How many claims have we heard like that, right?
Oh,
increases yield by 20%.
All day. Yeah. Every product.
So the
one claim we won't make.
Well, the conversation that was had was, even if we could produce the exact same thing with what we were doing before,
yep, you're winning.
We're winning.
Yeah.
And or if we can get close and pick up on efficiencies or be scalable at an easier cost to have less bullcrap down the line, then it's worth it, right? Our first run was by no means a failure. Definitely was a huge learning curve for us because of the, trying to build up and the way that we irrigate and things of that nature. We might be a little unique. But it wasn't a failure by any means. Adjustments needed to be made. And now we're at a point right now where I can confidently say we haven't even unlocked the full potential of what we can be doing with these products. But again, it's a long time in the making, right? We've got already a workhorse of a brand out there that we need to be consistently producing the same product and or better. So we can't just like, hey, let's rip everything out and change everything overnight. So it was slow R&D process, but now, we came to a point where it was like, find something that's kind of like your base that I can roll out everywhere right now, right? And it's something that plays well with everything, every single one of our genetics, every single unique difference, and maybe each grow room. It works well with everything. And we're producing the same and or better with what we were doing before. Numbers don't lie, right? Numbers, terpenes, all of those things.
If success is measured on like if we went into it with the idea, like Tyler said, like if we just match what we were doing, but it was more efficient to get there. It was easier for us to get there. Then that was a success. Like that was the openness that we had, right? The reality is an increase in yields, an increase in quality, at least certainly with specific strains and things like that. So I think we can say that, we definitely hit that part of, getting that or better, and better would be, where I say we landed. So much so that we have gone ahead. We are 100% transitioned now. So the whole 3,500 lights has made that transition. To Alex's point, it was a long, 2 years to get there. But we had to make sure that, we were doing the right thing. Once you got to once we had a certain level of confidence, it was just a matter of actually getting it. It was a matter of like getting it through, our SOP, getting it through the whole rest of the facilities and stuff like that. It just took time, right?
Yeah.
But we're very, very happy with where we're at. And the same thing applies to the Lux side of things, right? Like I always wanted there to be a better nutrient solution. I think Tyler and I also agreed. We always wanted there to be a better lighting solution. We grew under everything that you guys have all experienced, right? We were on parabolics. We ran Magnum air-cooled hoods. Eventually ran to, double-ended HIDs, which still are hanging in a lot of our facilities, obviously. But we always hoped that something would come out that would reduce the electrical demand and additionally reduce the heat load. We tried random things like those satellite UFO LEDs,
Yeah.
right? Just little bits here and there, never through, whole room or whole facilities into R&D, but definitely like open to the idea that some light was going to come out and finally, disrupt what we knew. So just like with the Athena side, the Lux side effectively did that. We put it into an R&D with the 645s. And then I think we were one of the lucky few to start to
You were one of the
sample some of your 860s.
It was you, Steezy, and Jungle Boys all got rooms at 860s.
And we're absolutely loving those things, right? Tyler can speak on details of those, but so it's another example of like, us knowing that or hoping and praying that something would, there would be a solution, and there is.
Tyler, what are you seeing with LEDs over the HPS, and on all the new builds? Are you guys going all LED now and getting away from HPS completely?
Yeah, good question. Everything that we're doing moving forward, even like additional rooms in some of our existing facilities that we're currently building out, LED, 860 watt extra red spectrum LEDs. First run on those without having adapted to any learning curves and things like that, in an existing grow room that was operational for 4 years that we had data going back on with HID lighting. I think I shared this information with Alex, is with our old lights and our old nutrients, we produced X grams per square foot, pounds per light. Implemented Athena, we watched that ticker kind of go up, and then went basically light for light with that same recipe with the Athena and with the 860s, and we watched it just go up even more. But what was interesting with that was the learning curve was minimal. Granted, I'm still learning here. And I've had a lot of good people like Brent and Roach and a couple guys like that have given me some pointers and some things that I've seen kind of differently. Room control is definitely a lot easier, maybe because of the fact I'm coming in at, 0.6 tons per watt or per light, right?
Per 1,000 watt
per
light.
1,000 watt light.
That was our calculation previous.
Yeah,
For sure.
So I've got full capabilities of doing whatever we want in that room. But just when you talk about like light penetration and actual like light absorbed by the plant that's beneficial, when you're running an HPS, you used this term yesterday, yield dilution. There's a point where you could produce too much plant matter in a room where like, man, these things are booming, they're huge, they look good. But at a certain point, there's kind of diminishing return on quality with that. We didn't see that as much with the LED. Not only did we have more product out of the room, it was better quality, top to bottom. Just maybe the light penetration, the bottoms filled out more. You saw more color throughout. Terpene production was higher. We have test results proving that terpene production was higher than the HID room. So it was a success across the board. So all 12,000 lights that we're 8,000 lights that we're designing right now is all designed with 860 watt LEDs.
Yeah. I learned about yield dilution from Morgan Patterson, and it's an actual, word in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the two things that are going to affect the quality of cannabis regarding yield dilution is one, PPFD, too much PPFD, too much light. And then two is the whole crop steering, the advice that some companies are giving on crop steering. We don't like saying crop steering, we say irrigation strategy. And when you pump the EC too high and you're driving your drybacks way too much, your yield goes crazy, right? And you pump, high PPFD on the canopy, your yield goes crazy, but yield dilution, terps and THC goes down.
Yep.
I think we've always used the term, I like that term, diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
It's a similar like concept, right? More is not always
Better,
Yeah.
for sure.
better.
Yep.
I mean,
Did you, going from the 15-part recipe that you guys were using, you can be 100% honest. Did you see a negative impact on quality going from 15 parts, organics, organic inputs, all these different microbes, mycorrhiza, trichoderma, sweeteners, all this stuff, to a 2-part Athena with cleanse? 100% honesty. Did you see a negative impact on terp testing, THC testing,
no.
bag appeal?
It got better.
It got better.
Yeah. It got better.
On top of other things that you're not mentioning, like cleanliness,
Yep.
right? Which that in and of itself is huge, right?
Yep.
So we've had, because we use beneficials so much, Tyler mentioned we have a couple of our facilities. They're on, they're kind of dubbed these zero waste facilities, but ultimately what they are is they've got wastewater skids, reclaimed skids, and we're treating all the water and reusing it. And not only like the impact that it has on that reclaim skid, but obviously all of the irrigation components, the PE pipe and the emitters themselves, any piece of PVC. So just the cleanliness side alone, right? Huge advantage. The ease, right? So now instead of, to your part, the 15 things, it's the 2 things. Like, so the ease makes us more efficient, which has a huge, benefit to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then to your point, I think you were originally asking, the quality of the finished product.
Yeah, that's
The
what
THC, terpene, nug size, bag appeal, smell, all of that, which obviously goes with terpenes, is been on point. We're killing it. We've always been proud of the product we produce. So it's not to say that like, we were growing shit product and now it's amazing or anything. Like we've always been proud of it. But
no, you guys
we
have
are
always grown fire.
definitely like looking at this stuff and saying, wow, like there's some examples of some of this recent harvest and recent batches being like just phenomenal. Some of the best stuff that we've ever grown. So
Awesome, dude.
Yeah, I'd like to tack onto that a little bit. I think the concept behind it too, for us, what's most important is, you want to talk about grams per square foot, pounds per light, all of these things. Those are all great, right? But for us, it needs to be a consistent product that hits the shelf every single time. So take an example, our gelato. It's one of our staples in our grow. That gelato needs to be the same every single time a consumer buys it and opens it. With the method that we were using before, it was kind of like a stress-based recipe, right? You're adding certain ingredients at certain times. You're taking them away at certain times. You're trying to play this game with, a give and take throughout the 8-week cycle with 100 different genetics, right? The concept behind something that's like Athena, that it's just an extremely stable, well-balanced diet that you give your plant all the food that it needs, and it's going to take what it needs when it needs it. Mm-hmm. You're not stripping your plant at certain times of things where it's like, hey, I kind of still wanted a little bit more of that. You know what I mean? Where you go in a room where there's 10 different strains growing in a 150 light room, and you're like, well, this one's got a little bit of CalMag deficiency, to Alex's point. But for us, it needed to be super streamlined for what we were using, and it had to be cookie cutter. We couldn't treat things differently especially within the same grow rooms, because of just scalability, right?
Yeah.
So if one strain needed a little bit of something else for a little bit longer, like, hey, is the end result of that genetic going to be good at the end of the day with what we're running with it? If not, it's just not going to make the cut with our program, right? What we're seeing with something like Athena is it's a lot more well-rounded because, granted, you need to, still plant things accordingly by zone or by room because certain strains or genetics are not going to eat the same, but you're giving everything the same well-balanced diet that's more than enough for what it needs to thrive off of. And I think that's the concept there for us. What matters the most is that it's just very stable and balanced, right?
And
that allows us to bring certain strains back into the mix that maybe didn't do so well under the previous lineup. So
yeah.
the ability, there's a lot of strains that we would love to grow that just don't fit our model because they're too long of flowering is now the primary reason. Previously we did have certain things that like, well, this was a little too finicky and it would require, a little more nitrogen, and we didn't have the ability to feed a special blend to just these when everything else, they all needed to eat the same. And so you'd pull certain things that strains that we knew we'd love, strains that I grew up growing, right? Even like some of the hazes and stuff like that. And now this in theory, minus the, we still have the constraint by the time, right? We have a really strict business model and scheduling like we kind of talked about earlier. And as such, some of the longer or none of the longer strains really work for us. Some of them obviously can be manipulated into finishing, in a shorter period, but a lot of the things that we would love to grow just don't work when you only have 8 or 9 weeks to flower.
Yeah. And it really makes sense too, like going from a 8 to 16 part and really relying on the nutrient side and changing that, bumping it up, taking it out. Now it's like what we flatlined it. It's flatlined, and we're not relying on a Band-Aid or an additive. It's just flatline and really falling back on the genetic and letting the genetic do what it's supposed to do and what that makeup is, and having it fit in the staple. If it doesn't, that's why we're pheno hunting. You guys, I know you guys have that going, but it's like taking the back seat to where we don't have to find a Band-Aid. It makes the end user's job extremely easy, which is exciting. And like you said, to Tyler's point, like you guys have, the Athena line under your belt. It's fully running on 3,500 lights. And, the exciting part for me is he's like, we haven't even unleashed what we feel the potential of this model is on a 2-part, which again is exciting to, get up to, over 10,000 lights it's going to be.
You definitely have to be willing to listen to you, Alex, and listen to the facility advisors and be willing to kind of let go of some of these things that especially as it relates to the stacking and these high numbers. When people start throwing around some of these ECs that previously people would be like, fuck no, what are you talking about, right? But then when you understand, like, I like to think that we're all intelligent enough, like, tell me why, talk me through it. There's a logic that you have to be able to explain it, and you guys can actually do that. And when you do, you're like,
it makes
right?
sense.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, right? But you definitely have a willingness to, you have to have a willingness to like kind of let go of some of those things. And that goes back to, like I said before, like now I guess I'm kind of that person I talked about on the hill where you're like, shit, no, you can't do that. You can't, right? And Tyler's going to implement a lot more, kind of remote accessibility, at least for viewing, but even probably for controls, than we've ever set up, because we're setting up in San Bernardino and we're setting up and there's so many. And so that's another example of me having to like let my guard down and be like, the systems are now proven to work and there's things out there that we know can actually do it. But, I like redundancies and I like mechanical things as opposed to like, so
Yeah.
There's definitely, you need to be able to, I guess, change,
Yeah.
grow with the times.
On the, you were going over the filtration system.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are reclaiming your water. Now, I've heard of this, right? I mean, what do you think the percentage of facilities? I mean, is it a California regulation right now? Or are they you have to reclaim water, or you guys are just ahead of the times?
We're ahead, not 100% by choice. Our two largest facilities are on septic tanks. We're not tied to the sewer. But it's kind of a blessing in disguise that this happened to us and that we took this route, because it is going to become mandatory. I think, what is it, 23?
Well, it's another example. You have state legislation, you have municipalities and water boards, and all have varying degrees of like what they want to see done.
Yeah.
So, as an example, in Cathedral City, right? Like they're implementing, an ordinance that requires that no wastewater be discharged to the sewers. So effectively, everyone will have to figure out somehow to either haul off-site or treat.
Is that a city ordinance?
And that's a city,
That's
right?
a city.
That's an example of a municipality who's decided something. But then you also have the authority and the regulations of the water boards. So in Palm Springs, we have two different water agencies. The Desert Water Agency is our water provider for some of our facilities, and Coachella Valley Water District is a provider for some of the others. And they have varying degrees of what they want to see. But I think it's safe to assume, right? So one, we have the ability to do it now. We've proven that we can. So I think we have some obligation is to be good stewards to our land and our resources. But I also think that, you're going to see a lot more regulation come down the pipes as it relates to that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we're kind of just one step ahead.
Yeah.
And we've worked with some really cool people along the way to figure these technologies out. And we're working with even, better people now to help specifically figure these issues out.
Hydrologic has a skid just for water reclamation, right?
Tyler can tell you all about that.
Yeah, let's talk. I want to talk about it just because this is something that, cultivators in California are going to have to pay attention to, don't you think?
100%. Yep. Great point. Hydrologic makes a skid. That's what we currently use at any of our sites. We currently have 3 operations that we use hydrologic reclaim skids. So basically how it works is all the leachate water from our table runoff, which is 15-20% plant runoff, right? Mm-hmm. And then you've got other things, waste from, switching recipes on a doser or things of that nature that's just going to go down the drain. On top of that, you have the waste of the city water skid with the concentrate that's going to put off is also collected into the head waste tank. So it's going to kind of dilute your TDS a little bit with the waste of the concentrate of the city water,
Of the city RO skid.
It runs through a set of a bunch of different things, a chlorine injector, which will strip the iron out of the water. We also use that measuring in millivolts on ORP to kind of try to disinfect, to Charlie's point earlier on our old line, feeding sugars and beneficial bacterias, right? It was hard to combat the biofilm that came in that high TDS water.
What were you seeing? Were you getting more wastewater with more organics, or is it just harder to get that ORP up in your treatment?
Both. It was hard to get the ORP in the treatment, and it was harder to prevent biofilm from popping up in our permeate tanks, in our product tanks.
It basically inhibited the wastewater skid from effectively doing its job.
Yeah,
right. It puts so much burden on the wastewater skid. That hydrologic skid all of a sudden is like, whoa. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So talk about membranes and all that stuff, just high maintenance at that point.
Yeah. Runs through a green sand filter, carbon filter, and then a set of high TDS membranes. So just an advanced RO membrane, stripping all of the nutrients and minerals that we've just added to the water, fed to our plants, went through the plant, stripping it back out for reuse, close to 0 ppm. On top of that, we collect all of our condensate water. We're in the desert. It gets to 120 in the summer. Our ACs run like workhorses. We collect a lot of condensate water. I'd say about 40-50% of our actual water use comes alone from our condensate water,
which is dehused and HVACs.
Wow,
dehused and HVACs.
Yeah.
So a lot of storage for those. You guys saw the water room, right? There's 15,000 gallons of storage alone in a 1,000 light facility. So you do the math on how much we're going to need with scaling. That's a lot of space that it takes. But reusing condensate water's pretty easy. We like to ozonate the water just to get those ORP levels up. Condensate water can be kind of gross, right? So we want to disinfect it, get those levels of ORP up a little bit higher, run it through Hydrologic makes another great product. It's called the ARC skid, yep. And that just treats all the condensate. But that's a zero waste. There's no...
It treats 100%.
It treats basically, awesome. Other than just like membrane backflushes, which again, that will end up in your waste tank to go through the reclaim skid. So you kind of get to milk that for what it's worth anyways. It's as close to 100% as you're going to get on condensate reusage.
Well, that condensate's pretty clean to begin with, right?
Yeah.
It's
I mean, it's like
low,
zero,
low,
almost
low
zero.
TDS, almost zero,
Yeah.
but it's of course could have pathogens, especially depending on if you've ever looked in the condensate lines of an HVAC unit.
sure.
Like
Yeah.
you tend to see what grows on those things. So we're treating it not for TDS or EC, but obviously for pathogens and things like that. So UV and ozone.
But you're also having a treatment plant come pick up water.
Yeah, so the discharge off of the reclaim skid, it's about a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 on any given day, right? Where it'll give you 3 gallons of discharge, which needs to be hauled off site and or evaporated. At the time, the evaporators were not, whether economically useful to us or not allowed or just didn't fit the space that we had. So we just put a tank there where once a week a third-party company will come and pick up our water, and they'll do what they need to do with that just so that they can dump it or whatever it is they do with that.
Is that expensive?
No, yes, at scale, it is, but it's definitely less expensive than a lot of these people hauling 100% of their wastewater, whether it be the municipality not allowing them to dump anything down the drain and or not having the experience like we do of actually successfully reclaiming that water for reuse.
There's a high capital expense associated with buying a hydrologic wastewater skid.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
they're not
yeah.
cheap, right? We're talking 6 figures to start
Oh, really?
for something that's going to process the volume of the water that we're after.
scale.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So there is a return on your investment for buying that and not hauling all of your water, but some people just can't do that up front.
You guys are doing some pheno hunting. How many seed pops do you have going on right now, and what breeders are you popping right now?
Yeah, so I'll touch on that. We're in a pretty, high demand market right now for very specific things. California is the most connoisseur-based customer in the whole entire world, right? It's the biggest weed economy in the world. So people like what they like, and they want a high variety of very exotic things. So we've got 125, just off the top of my head, 125 different phenotypes being tested right now, kind of scattered around, done strategically, right? We're not just going to fill 100 light rooms with all these different seeds and things that we don't know how they're going to do, right? So biting off little batches at a time, but about 125 different phenos kind of in the works right now. Some of the breeders that we're working with for some of these are, in my opinion, and I think Charlie can agree, some of like the best breeders in the industry right now. Compound genetics. We're looking for stability, right? When we're looking for a good genetic, we want something that, somebody might produce something that's super fire for a couple of runs, but then all of a sudden just something goes left or right, and it's like, well, why isn't this the same product, right? And for us, that's important. It's got to be consistent. So compound genetics, they're doing a lot of cool things right now.
Yep.
Seed Junkie's another cool one.
Yep.
And then we've got a lot of old school things too that we're kind of throwing back in the mix from seeds that we've gathered over the years that we just had sitting in a safe for a long time, where it's like, hey, let's bring these out and
Finally
get
pop
these
them.
going. Yeah, finally,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, now's the time. He touched on it, and you guys are all aware right now. This market is I've been doing this a long, long time. I know most of us in this room have been doing this a long time. This has got to be the most volatile, marketplace for finished cannabis goods that I've ever experienced. It's just insane. And so, obviously, you got to give yourself any competitive advantage you can. Quality is an easy way to do that. Not easy to get to quality, but if you have the quality, it's
step one.
yeah, it's step one, right? And so we've seen more, and I guess I'm probably guilty of this. We waited a little too long to start some of these things, because I'm recognizing now, like the demand for just new and ever changing, and we hopped on the runs train, but we probably got there like a little later than we should have. So we're still doing runs, and runs is great, people, but like hopping on the jealousy train. But we're gonna do a better job of being earlier to it. But part of that goes back to the whole idea that these SOPs are so strict and so like precise and already existing that we did what works for us. Mm-hmm. So where we slipped behind a little bit there, most certainly I'll be the first to admit it, was with a little bit of that genetics stuff, but we are well underway with 100+ plus new flavors coming this year now.
Nice.
The
We got
bigger
some
the
on week 7 right now, right?
Yeah.
Starting week 7
Yeah.
this week for
Nice.
a lot of our new stuff.
Yep.
So
the bigger the ship, the harder to turn.
I use that
Sure.
the analogy. It's like making a U-turn in a cruise ship, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I can do what we need to do to guide us, but like I can't do it like, pivot just 90 degrees in one. It takes us a minute, right? We implement something that starts with, because Tyler and I talking it through, and then where are we going to start and how's it going to roll down? Again, it's not all one building or one facility. We're spread out all over. So just figuring out like rolling out Athena. It's not just like, okay, turn on the lights tomorrow and Athena's on, right? We got to look at scheduling and when are we harvesting here and when's the right time to so
Yeah.
it's harder. The bigger you are, the harder it is.
Well, also, I think our smallest harvest is right around the 100 light mark. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, you want to roll the dice with something on R&D. We haven't really been big because we had proof of concept going into this, right? We rolled this out with Charlie's formula and his proof of concept. And it's like, this is the way that we're designing these things and we're doing them. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a little bit. And like the R&D side of things where it's like, we didn't give us much room to kind of test things without, because you're not going to feed different things in one room, right?
Yeah. No,
You got to make the change. And now you're talking 100 lights where it's like, let's roll the dice here. And there's big money, right? 100 lights is 100 lights. But to kind of touch on the last thing too, to Charlie's point, it was one of those things where if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? So we grew a lot of, we might be a little bit behind on some of these things, but looking into the future, it's like, okay, with what we have right now, 12,000 lights, are the consumers going to want triple the amount of the same things that we have now, right? Probably not, right? So we need to expand our variety just for the sake of our expansion because you're tripling the amount of the same genetics that you have. So that's why we're going all out right now because we're King's Garden, man, right? We don't do anything half-assed. We're going to do it extreme, and now's the time. Like, everybody's operating under the same guidelines right now. Everybody's switching to other, like the LEDs are a thing now, right? So everybody's using the LEDs, or if they're not, they're using the same HID lighting as everybody else. Everybody is, hopefully people are starting to move towards that, moving towards salt lines or clean lines and stuff like that. So if you put everybody in the same pool and everybody's going to grow the same, what's going to set you apart? One, it's going to be your SOPs. It's going to be your troubleshooting skills and how to identify problems as they happen or before they happen to try to prevent those things, your IPM game, and then your genetic demand, right? Like those are the things that's really going to set you apart. So that's why.
Then your costs.
And your cogs,
Cost of
your
producing.
cogs for sure.
Yeah.
So that's why we're doing, so many at once. It's like, okay, well, if you're going to do something, now is the time to do something drastic, and we're going to do it strategically. We're going to roll this out to where we're not going to shoot ourselves in the foot, and it's the end result for us is going to be good.
Yeah, just not taking, rolling the dice in this time of the market. It's scary.
Can't do that.
No, just don't have time. I mean, especially with, like you're saying, Charlie, like just the market is so educated. They always want something new, like every week. And it takes us, a quarter to roll out something new that is proven, consistent, stable, that we could throw in the lineup.
Yep.
So it's, you guys are fighting, it's time,
And then it's especially frustrating when these trends are fads, and not all of them are. There's plenty of like really good. We mentioned a few like the breeders and stuff that we love working with, and that have, But when a trend or a fad is born out of like some influencer or rapper or something like saying something on a song or doing something, and then that becomes the trend. It's beyond frustrating for somebody in our position to be like, well, first of all, why the hell is what so and so has to say you have any influence? And now, why do I have to pivot to so,
based on what he said.
yeah,
Yeah, that's-
so like at least I respect it when it's coming from the people that that we all have our own people that we know we respect, and whether it's a breeder or even an whatever, but if it's coming from certain people, you'll react a certain way. It comes from somebody else, and it seems to rub you a different way.
Yeah.
You kind of have to try to, like to Charlie's point too, like if you're trying to chase things and trying to trace trends and stuff like that, imagine for a large scale operator like us, 3,500 lights right now, how long do you think it takes for us to get one seed to market at scale after R&Ding it, making sure that it fits in our SOPs and our formulas and our growing methods? Okay, this is the one or two, whatever that we selected. It takes almost a year for us to actually get that to market at scale. Right, so it's like at that point, is that genetic here for is it here to stay? Right, within the market.
That's why we're late sometimes.
Yeah, right. It's like, hey, we were on it when it came out, and y'all wanted it, but it kind of ship has sailed, right? So there's a few staples that definitely haven't gone anywhere that have stood the test of time, and those are the things that we're after, things that have a little more longevity behind them because they're truly good genetics that people want. So upping our variety with those is kind of the goal right now.
Yeah, it's vital. You always have to be popping. You always have to be popping beans. Do you guys have any storefronts? Are you guys planning on doing any storefronts?
Retail's never been our thing, right? So I told you I started a retail in Westminster, California in 2003. It was called the Rancho Collective, right? Back in the days of everything just being an acronym. TRC, the Rancho Collective.
Where, what, Costa Mesa?
No, Westminster.
Westminster, okay.
Westminster, yeah. Westminster Boulevard, corner of Westminster and Rancho. So I got a little experience there specific to cannabis retail, and I'd had some retail experience like in the nursery side and stuff like that. I recognized pretty early on I'm not the person that wants to be doing retail. I'm not a great forward facing, this whole idea that the customer is always right has been bullshit to me forever. I'm like, no, there's some customers that are like wrong, and like I want to be the one to tell them that they're wrong, but I can't, supposedly. Apparently. So no, it was very clear early on that like retail is just a headache, right? It's a huge headache. But more importantly, like than it just being a headache, I recognized like, the value. So I, if you kind of step back and assess, the situation, this is again, going back, 20 years ago, the person who was going to be, better off from my perspective after doing my like thorough evaluation was the cultivator, right? There was lots of retails that we could go shop our product to. We always, of course, had the traditional patient side, that we could go to. There was very little interaction with, people to begin with, and definitely had the ability, to disguise and kind of, again, you got to think of like the time that we were in, right? And trying to be kind of behind the scenes. I give a lot of credit to the people who were early adopters, like Jungle Boys, early adopters of like, they've been doing this for a long time. They're not new, they're legacy guys, but they jumped in and said like, we're going to kind of show you what we're doing. Long before a lot of those people like were willing to do that, right? Myself included. So my partner Mike wanted to put, I remember years ago, the conversation came up, we're building these beautiful buildings. They have these state-of-the-art cultivation facilities. And he's like, I want a big old illuminated King's Garden sign on the side of the building, something you can see from the 10 freeway. And I'm just like, oh shit, what? Yep. Right? There's 1,000 light grow. You want to market with a King's Garden logo on it? Yep. So I've just come from that era where like, we don't like, no way, right? Flash forward to now, every one of our buildings has a big old logo on it. We're proud as hell of it. I'm so glad that he convinced me to like, that was the right decision. But coming from an era where like we didn't want to put ourselves out there quite as much, right?
Yeah, so coming from an era.
Kudos to all those who did.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Coming from an era where you're out at a bar, you're with your homies, and everyone's asking, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" It's like, "Oh,
construction."
Construction.
Yep.
Exactly.
And it was true. Construction was a very big part of what we were doing. Anyone who was setting up grows and stuff. I mean, like, you basically became an electrician, you basically became a mechanical engineer and learned HVAC and stuff like that because you didn't have access. Now, look, we get to call, and now we have the biggest, union companies and stuff like that salivating, begging for our work and stuff. But we couldn't call a local plumber before without risk or fear of like, I mean, so
somebody having something on you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so nice now, by the way, to be able to like pick up the phone and call somebody when something breaks. Like, I don't want to do that. So, okay, we're gonna pay somebody to do it, right?
So we were
Union
never lying
contract
when
or
we
whatever.
said construction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We learned all the trades.
We did.
Yeah.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday, how I was giving you guys props and praise of just doing this here alone, because this is something, this podcast and what you guys are doing, even with like the facility advisors and just access to information for people in our industry, whether it be people in the caregiver market and or people like us that are large scale operators, right? We came from a smaller scale at one point.
16 lights.
16 lights. Well, yeah, even smaller than that at some places, right?
Yeah.
How many people had to grow in their attic or garage, right?
Yeah.
So access to information has always been super limited. Nobody has the answers for everything, right? This is farming, and there's always different things that pop up and occur. But to have something like this where it's not Reddit, right? And it's not like before.
It's not the grow shop.
Yeah, it's not exactly.
The counter at the hydro shop.
Which we
got great advice. I mean, this is what we had.
It's what we had. But something like this with some of the top growers and professionals in the world in this industry, specific with the amount of like R&D backing that they're doing for this, to have something like this at just an arm's reach, that's not a social media platform that's just like visual based Instagram, right? Which people have gotten off of for years, right? Gotten their information from people like the Jungle Boys and Miami Mango and guys like that put all their info online because they want to help and teach people and kind of bring the industry up. So like people like us can really appreciate a platform like this where, you know, you could just listen to a couple different podcasts and it's things that people aren't talking about, right? Charlie and I, you know, I've been doing this for a little over 10. He's 20, 50, 25 years into this thing. Old school methodologies, right? Like you would tell me not to flush my plant to tell you you're crazy. You tell me to feed a clone at 2100 ppm, I tell you you're crazy, right? So there's a lot of things that's kind of like breaking our cycles into what we thought we knew or what was right to us at the time with changes in the industry and, you know, what we have, the resources that we have to be able to implement different things that were kind of shamed at that time, right? To learn those new things, it opens up the book a little bit more for us.
But when you guys back that up with like facility advisors, right? Like that's the differentiating factor there. You're not just saying like, hey, this is what you should feed the plants, or this is like, you've got like legit people who are out here in the world, like showing up in our grow and talking to us. And these are people who have as much and more experience as any of us. And it's extremely valuable. And it's not just a sales pitch as the other, like, you know, oftentimes where, you know, you get as much customer service as is needed to get the sale or attached to the sale, right? They kind of go hand in hand,
and then they disappear.
but then it's kind of, that's it, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that, you know, you guys are sharing this information and the Jungle Boys and Ivan and Roach and these guys are an open book and they're allowing you guys to help and you're allowing us. And like, it's the idea now that we can all kind of share information with each other. And that I'm sure at the end of the day, you know, I used to say, and I don't get to go in nearly as many grows as I once was, but, you know, I've never walked in a grow and not learned something from it. And that includes the shittiest grows that I've ever seen.
100%.
Right. And so getting like minds together to just bounce ideas, the most productive conversations that we have as it relates to our operations are Tyler and I just kind of like bouncing shit off of each other and like, well, I think this and this and right. And that's plug more people with more experience in, i.e. Alex and whoever else. Like, fuck, man.
And that's the opportunity I think that I saw that, you know, Brandon and I came up with this idea was, you know, being in sales my whole life, it was, you know, you got a product, you sell it, it's sold, collect the money, done. And, you know, for the FAs to be able to put their eyes on the garden and see something else that you guys don't see, and then just be able to bounce the ideas off each other and figure it out is, you know, obviously something that we've never had in the industry, but something that has really taken the FA team to the next level. And, you know, a lot of the growers, I mean, they respect it. They love it. You know, it's something that is, we're able to push the envelope, you know, a lot further than we have ever done just with multiple eyes, experiences, walking into places instead of just verbally talking over the phone. You know, it's huge.
It is.
It's the technical side of things too, where I could like for somebody like me that's seeing something that's kind of out of the norm. Okay, well, what are my variables here? What am I doing differently? Well, for starters, I've changed our whole nutrient line, right?
Yeah.
So to have somebody that's from that line to be like, yo, I'm seeing a little bit of this, and his response is, send me your runoff numbers. Like, okay, so there's a technical answer that's going to be following this. It's not just, oh, well, you're doing this or that, just an assumption. It's let me see remotely
data.
inside that substrate. Let me see what that is so that I can actually give you a proper answer, not just give you some bullshit, just run around to try to get you to buy more of something, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, we haven't had a failure on the program yet, and we haven't unlocked the full potential, but some of those small conversations have gone a long way because maybe it was exactly what was said in that conversation between the two of us, or maybe it just unlocked a little idea
clicked.
and something clicked where I was like, you know what, I need to do this a little differently. So to have that as a tool is just to anybody, the biggest growers in the world or the smallest growers in the world, to be able to hit the Instagram or something and, get a response back like, hey, this is,
I always got really confused when I'd go on a nutrient company's page and it'd say, "Oh, we don't answer our DMs." I'm like, what? How does that make any sense? It's like we're here to we got 3 guys full time answering DMs. It's so important to get the right knowledge out there. With the FAs and that experience, what's cool about it, it's like we don't always have all the answers, but I think that we collab together and communicate to find a solution. And a lot of these guys, sometimes, Alex, how many times have you called Chris Duran and you're like, hey, I have a problem here and I need to get to the bottom of it?
Weekly, man.
Yeah.
And again, it's just, always evolving and learning and just not being stuck in your ways and just being open-minded to that there could be a different solution, a different route, and just getting a different perspective on that problem, at hand.
Yeah, I think it's
there
important.
usually always is a different route and a solution.
Million ways.
I mean, there's a million ways.
Yeah, I think it's important for our FAs to always have humility, because we've had a few more ego personalities on the team that didn't last long. But with that humility, you're not afraid to go out and say, hey, I don't know the right answer to this question before I tell King's Garden to do this. I'm gonna call
We're learning every day.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't have all the answers, but we have the team to find the answer for that specific problem for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are you guys are in California? Are you planning to expand to any other states or anything in the works that you feel comfortable talking about?
Nothing that we're really, so we're so focused on right now this expansion and what we're doing in California. We have always known that California was like the make it or break it place, right? So it's home to all of us to begin with, so it was important, but it's, to Tyler's point, the most discerning market, and it's going to chew up and spit out a lot of cannabis companies in the next couple of years.
Yep.
So we've always, been proud of the idea that we can succeed or have been succeeding in California. We want to prove that we can continue to do that. It's really, really hard for me to think of how we can expand into other states while maintaining the integrity and the devotion to the way that we do things in the SOPs. So, of course, we love the idea, the concept, right? Certain states more than others, obviously, are really intriguing. It's highly, highly likely if you ever see us in another state, which as of right now is not, the case, but if you do see us in another state, it would likely be under like a licensing type of model, because again, the idea that like Tyler and I can go to Florida and be there all the time it's just difficult for us right now with all the expansion and stuff that we've got going on. So potentially through some sort of a licensing deal or something like that. But no, we're just so focused right now on this local expansion. But kudos to those who have figured out ways to make that happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
In particular, the Jungle Boy's been following them in their Florida expansion. Looks like they're about ready to open up retail. Looks like they've got their first harvest already come down, and so it's super cool to watch people that we respect be able to pull that off and do it not under this public MSO model. We know all too well how that works, and so the idea that they pulled that off, the way they've pulled everything off, bootstrapped it, is just awesome.
Just like you guys. You guys are the same way. You guys are operators.
Yeah.
To the core.
Yeah.
Like you guys are cultivators, you're operators. The same exact thing as Ivan and the boys. So it's awesome to see. do you get a lot of inbound on your Instagram or inbound in general from a state that's like, hey, like, when you come in here, I know you guys do.
We see it. Yeah, we see it. And neither one of us actually are running the social media, so we see it less. But the states that I've heard people are always asking about are actually the states that they're the right states to be in. It's the Floridas and the Jerseys and New Yorks and stuff. But again, most of those with their idea of the vertical integration and the need for being vertical, I'll say it again, we're not retail operators.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why it would be like through a partnership and a licensing type deal, like going in to grow fire product in another state, like using our SOPs and our kind of, system. I could see that doable, but going in and running, multiple retails because you have to be vertical and stuff like that. It's not our expertise. I'll be totally honest with you. I don't think I could successfully pull off a retail.
I think you'd want to.
And I know I don't want to.
No, I ran a retail hydro store for like 12 years, and I lived there for 4 of those years.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it really takes to get, the retail customer satisfaction and the whole customer front facing is difficult. What advice would you have for a new brand coming up, new cannabis brand that's coming up? What advice would you give a new brand coming up that wants to make it big?
In this state, in California, I'd wish them luck.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. Yeah. It's going to be a wild ride. It's tough to say, but I ultimately think that the companies that are going to succeed in any state, and this isn't like, the only ones that will, but I think a big part of it's going to be, just remaining loyal to who you are as a company and starting out, like the kind of family feel and what we have, the workplace vibe and just what happens there is such a big part of what King's Garden is. And if you lose touch of, like, I started growing weed because I wanted access to more weed to smoke and of course to sell on the traditional market and stuff like that, but you got to remember why you started. And I have a dear friend of mine who we lost on the hill working 1 year, but we'd be in the middle of like busting our ass, maybe running miles of poly pipe through a forest, trekking up a hill, rolling water tanks uphill to get them to the high spot, digging ponds, developing springs, you name whatever, pick the back-breaking job you were doing on that given day. And Carlos would look up, he's, Charlie, there's got to be an easier way to smoke a joint. Right? And so you got to remember, we did this because we wanted to smoke more joints. We did it because I wanted better weed. I wanted more weed. Eventually it was, I want to provide for my family and myself. But if you lose touch of the idea that this is all about the plant, then I think you're destined to fail.
Yeah.
And if it just becomes a rat race, where you're staring at the books all day and trying to squeeze a penny out of this or juice another dollar here, if you don't at least have, that doesn't mean you have to consume. I'm a big consumer, but at least respect and love. Like some things change. Maybe I won't be able to consume my whole life. I mean, I hope I will, but maybe I won't. But at least having the respect for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of companies are going to fail just based on the idea that they have no love to begin with for the plant and therefore really have no business in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't understand it.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll all succeed and we'll fail.
I
don't know.
You saw it happen. You saw it happen in Canada.
Yeah.
You saw it. I mean, Canada is a perfect mirror of what the United States will probably be.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're seeing a lot of these smaller craft farmers. My buddy Chris is one of them, and he's got a small little hunter lighter up in Canada. He's putting out fire. He's running Athena, and he's got a good solid business there. But these big, huge Aurora and Canopy growth, I talked to a lot of guys in Canada, and they're failing hard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's a matter of how long. So they have access to public capital allows that drowning to be a much slower process. They were failing years ago. I checked out these. I was in Canada. We almost went public, and that's a whole nother story for another day. But
Whoa.
5 years ago, these places were growing garbage and talking about how they were working the kinks out, talking about how they've got GMP certified facilities that can't grow crap. Like it's dog shit. Excuse my. So
It's true.
very cool to hear that, somebody's finally figuring it out there. And
Oh yeah.
I guess my point in that is that, yes, I hope that if anyone's going to fail, it's not your friend growing fire, and that it is the ones who are, but the reality is your friend doesn't have access to unlimited capital, I'm guessing.
No.
And some of those guys just keep go back to Canaccord and raise more money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I had Autumn Carsey on.
Loved that.
Did you? Yeah?
Yeah.
Thanks. That's cool. They so had her on, and we talked about tax reform, and she's got a big movement. Are you guys doing anything to get behind tax reform on cannabis?
I'm following Autumn's lead. I'm using her boilerplate templates to get them to both of the cities that we're in, Palm Springs and Cathedral City. Cathedral City's already received theirs. I'm actually on the task force, the cannabis task force in Cathedral City. So I'm very vocal in that particular city and pushing hard for it. It's a very interesting topic. It's dealing with local. I loved her approach, right? She's like, we're going to start with the cities, and they've had some great success with some of these bigger cities, Oakland and San Francisco and things like that, right? Little city of Cathedral City, the response is, and this isn't me accepting it, we will continue to push, but the response is that they've already baked in. So we're saying you got to lower. They're some of the highest cannabis taxes in the state. They're 10% gross revenue for dispensaries, and they're $10 per square foot annual for cultivation.
Whoa.
So some of the highest in the state, and we're pushing them to say to align with some of the neighboring cities and some of the other just cities in the state, closer to $5 a square foot and closer to 5% gross revenue. Their immediate response is that they've already baked in the revenue from that they're expecting from this 10% and $10 per square foot into the next 2 years' budgets. So if you tell them we're going to reduce the taxes by 50%, they're looking at a $4 million, whatever it is, like deficit of where's this money coming from? So the council, the policymakers, the immediate response from them is, show me where this other money is coming from, which I didn't know I was supposed to be their accountant now, or their, so they won't accept just on the surface that we need to reduce our taxes because that's going to throw their budget out. And to which our response is, watch what's happening to your taxes right now already, month over month, they're declining. Don't do it. Kill the businesses in your city, and then what are you going to do? Where's the money coming from then?
You got zero.
You got zero, right? So we're trying to dealing with policymakers in a small city where the only responsibility that they feel they have is to the constituents who, elected them, and that's it. Like they just think, and so it's tough. It's an uphill battle in these little cities. I think you're going to see more success, and Autumn is amazing for being able to do this. In these bigger cities that have a more liberal and progressive thought and ability to kind of think down that road than you are in these cities that are oh, you're just talking about taking my money away. That's how they see it, right? Yeah. I'm just asking for a reduction in taxes, because so much so that we have some of the community task force members who are like, well, it's not our fault if you guys can't run a good business. This is what happens in any new business. You guys obviously just aren't good at business, so you'll fail and someone else will take over your spot. I'm like, whoa. And then you got other people, and they're saying guys, if King's Garden is failing, your whole cannabis in the city or valley is at risk, right? And right over their head. Mm-hmm. So we'll keep trying. We'll keep trying, and we won't stop. But I don't know how successful we'll be.
At where the price of cannabis is right now, and where your tax structure is for Cathedral City, is it sustainable?
No.
I didn't think so.
Absolutely not. So, the market needs to adjust, or the costs need to go down for us to come out of the red.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think I'm not ashamed to say it. I think that anybody who's in this space right now is seeing the same things. Mm-hmm. We're a very, very lean company, and we're very, very good at what we do. As a result, we've been able to put some money into savings when times were better. But the way things are right now, we will burn cash, and I believe most companies will until the point that they can't anymore.
You're not the only one. You know,
I know I'm not.
Jungle Boys is having the same problem. Mm-hmm.
It's everybody.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. These taxes are not sustainable.
Yep. It's not.
It's crazy.
And the cost, you know, it's one of two things, right? It's like I said, I mentioned lowering the cost. We've done that. Mm-hmm. Thank you to you guys again for a lot of that, like help and guidance there. We have done that, but that's not like we've skinned that thing down so much. Like we're really, really lean and really, really good at what we do. Our costs aren't. We don't have a lot of ability to lower costs. What we need to do is lower taxes.
Yeah,
because the costs are pretty damn fixed at this point.
Yeah, I think 2022, especially 2023, if things don't change on tax reform, you're going to see them drop like flies.
We'll see what happens, right? I think I've heard that Newsom has directly spoken on the topic now. I guess he's mentioned that he's going to have the discussion. So I don't know, but it's overtaxed. And what other industry do we see municipal and state taxes on such high levels? And
Nothing.
The end product is, in some situations, I'm hearing 40+% taxes by the time it gets to the consumer. And then you wonder why it's the black market or gray market or illicit market is just thriving.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're selling good depths for $300 and $400 a pound, and they're not taxed.
Yeah. I don't think anything's been as taxed as heavy as cannabis ever.
No.
In history.
Just wait till the feds come on.
I know.
Yeah.
What is it? 5% tax, right?
Well, yeah. And look, I'm guilty of it. I've always said, but this is where like I encouraged legal cannabis, right? I was a proponent of it, and I said, like, give us a rule book, let us follow the rules, and we'll do it, right? I believed that we could make a legitimate industry out of it. I could make a legitimate living for myself and raise my family and my kids this way. But I knew it needed to be out of the shadows and kind of into the light in order for that to happen. So I was a proponent. I said, let's do this. Let's like give us rules. Let's do it. I just don't think that anyone ever expected the rule book to look like a Bible, right? Just thick. And I don't think that we really knew what we were asking for. Mm-hmm. I stand by the idea that I want to be, you know, in this position. I want to be a proponent of legal cannabis, and I want to play in this space. But like the idea that we just openly accepted everything they threw at us was a big fault, a big flaw on our part, right? On my part and many others' part. Like we're like, oh, here's our rule book, without actually reading it or anything first, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, well, back then you did the math and it made sense.
that's the other thing. What worked out, and that's what I'm telling the city of Cathedral City, right? I helped write that ordinance, right? I agreed to that ordinance when it was put into place. And when it was put into place, the numbers worked out. It penciled out. For lack of a better term, it penciled out. Mm-hmm. And now it doesn't.
Yep.
Right? So.
And that's also, I mean, it's compounding the issue with, inflation and cost of goods. I mean, that's not helping the situation at all. I mean, that's.
Why is the price of everything going up right now? Labor, fuel, like all of our input materials, power, just everything is going up, but the price of our finished good is just soaring downward.
Yeah.
Recreational consumable, man.
Yeah. It's that one's like, you can't buy a used car for what they paid for it brand new, it's.
Used car prices are through the roof right now.
Everything.
It's crazy.
New car price, used car prices, it doesn't matter what they are. They're through the roof. But the price, you can buy the best cannabis you've ever seen for the lowest prices, right?
Yeah.
Just literally, what? You look at these bags, you're like, oh my, these are just fire, right? So, and it's happening all the way through. It's on the commercial. I mean, it's on the bulk wholesale side, but look at what these retailers are getting beaten up too. We keep hearing these terms. If it's not a BOGO, it's a no-go. Right? You go and try and sell your product into a store, and all these stores are like, if it's not a BOGO, it's a no-go. Everyone wants free product, discount. Like, they think they should be paying $10 for an eighth of premium
Making you pay for shelf space.
Yeah, paying for shelf
That's
space.
brutal. That's
Yeah,
brutal.
slotting fees. Tough times we're in.
You guys are in all the cookies, right?
Yeah, we, I want to say we are. We have historically been in all of the cookies. They have different ownership structures, kind of in different locations, and so things kind of change a little bit here and there. But we've always had a great relationship with the cookie stores. I think we're in most of the Stizzy stores and all of those big players that have the multiple storefront operators. The One Plants, the Stizzies, the cookies. We're seeing, a lot of love from all those people.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those are the only guys in that space that seem to be surviving. All of these single owned mom and pop shops are struggling.
Holding
seems.
on.
Yeah. Barely holding on.
Yeah. Tyler, we talked about Chris earlier, but you are now on their new dilution solution system.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up. So Chris came to us end of 2020. Said, "Hey, I got something. It's ready for you. I got something." So we took a trip out from Colorado and sat with us and our boy Carlos, who he introduced to us from Bear Ag. And long story short, we were the first people at scale and in California that he installed the dilution solutions controller into our facility, and an existing facility, actually our largest facility, 1,100 light facility. So we took that one, had batch tanks already, kind of ran on dosatrons and things of that nature. Pulled everything kind of, sequentially, and installed that. That's a game changer for us, and moving forward even more so, because of the accessibility I have with it, like remotely, but also the consistency and the kind of user interface. I have a different interaction with the facility now because of that. So just to give you like an example, we use it for fertigation. I don't use it for irrigation at the time. It was an existing facility, so all of our irrigation lines and wires have already been ran. It was a headache to try to change that, and what we were doing was no different than what that was going to do for us at the time, right? But for fertigating, now we could have one skid instead of a doser for every single batch of rooms, batch of tanks, and or dosatron for a recipe. No more direct inject directly to the plant.
Yep.
One skid with the editrons hooked to this computer, this controller, where we input all of our recipes. So whichever, and we started this, excuse me, we started this with our original recipe. And it was actually really good that we did that because, with the time Chris spent with us in the facility, setting this thing up, we learned a lot about chemical compatibility with the certain like acidic values of different ingredients being mixed together, with less contact time or mixing time with water and all of these things, to where there was kind of like a diminishing return on the amount of product that you were putting in to reach a certain conductivity value. Wasn't adding up the same as like a dosatron or like your hand mix application would, right? So we're like beating our heads up, working on this thing for weeks and weeks and dialing it in differently than how you would expect to. And then we swapped everything to the 2-part, and it was just like, again, the stability and the chemical compatibility that these ingredients have with each other. They're just meant to be, injected or mixed, however you want to do it. It's spot on. You say I want 50 mLs of this ingredient and it's going to give me 2 EC, right? That's what that value is going to, it's going to make sense at the end of your line. But so basically we have all of our recipes and put it into the controller, and at just the touch of a button, I can fill groups of batch tanks within hours for the same day or next day, however you want to do it, for specific harvests. So depending on what stage of that plant or that room is in, if I want 3 EC, 2 EC, whatever it is, we're scheduling everything in advance. Again, going back to like as much as you can schedule out, the better you are. So I'm implementing this thing to have kind of like our baseline formula in it. So, okay, we're going to plant this room on this day.
Programming the whole flower cycle.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's gangster.
Having recipes already set, right?
Giving the baseline and kind of the platform that just based like off of experience, like this is what the plant is going to want. Granted, it will give you override access and like things for subject to change, like we need to do this on this day, whatever, whether it be a pot reset or, you know, increase our EC, things of that nature. But that's up to the operator or myself to be able to make those adjustments on the fly. But it gives you your whole harvest, basically. The day that you plant, I know that it's going to need this within these weeks and these days, and it's going to just kind of be scheduling, right?
That's a
scheduling.
game changer.
Yeah. We're doing some crafty shit with it. Long story short, we're trying to put things on loops where we can measure, you know, EC, conductivity, you know, pH in your batch tank. We're automating stock tank systems a little bit differently, not just something that you can go and buy off the shelf like a Nutrisolve or something. We're going to design our own concept, you know, volumetrically, where like a hopper can dump, you know, a certain amount of salt by weight, right? So you don't have to like worry about how many bags did I set out for this 200-gallon stock tank, right? You don't need to worry about that stuff anymore. So that's going to allow us to do stuff like that, right?
Moving forward on your new builds, all dilution solution.
Yep.
Sick.
Shout out Chris, man.
Yeah.
Gangster product.
Right on.
Mm-hmm.
All Editron, no more Dosatrons.
Yep.
Editron and dilution.
Dilution
Yeah.
solutions.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of dosatrons, you know, but I just haven't really. I did Editron a long time ago, and I was using monosilicic acid, and I just, you know, I never put it in my lines again, so I'm still, you know, haven't gone back to the Editron thing, but.
It was another
Not
example
close
of
to
one
it.
of those things I had to break down that barrier a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dosatrons I love. They're mechanical, hydro-powered, right? So you're never worried about power failures or
Yeah.
anything like that, right? I understood it, like, you know, the basis of it, and so it made it, you know, nice and easy for me. The Editron was, you know, required the again, kind of breaking down what you know and saying like, but Chris does a good job of it. He explains that, you know, this isn't like, you know, just a brand new thing that they created. This is, you know, proven and has a track record, and
Something they've been working on for a long time.
and then his dilution solution stuff is like the interface. When you just look at it, it looks like you're looking like an iPad or something, as opposed to like, I don't know if you ever looked on like Argus. I mean, obviously you guys have, but like an Argus system or some of those like Tank Logic stuff, anything that's controlling logic and stuff like that. And it looks like it's like Windows 95.
Oh, it's old.
Right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's all
what is
old and outdated.
this?
Yeah.
And so like he
Is
talks
that a
about
dial-up
like,
noise?
yeah. You see like visual representations of how full tanks are or something like that, right? Like things
It's
just
amazing.
look like, you're like, wow, like
Mm-hmm.
that's
look like
cool.
they should.
Yeah.
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 Going back on the Editron, I haven't used that for any kind of dosing without a controller kind of telling it what to do. So when you have something like a dosatron and you're trying to inject ingredients, it's based off your flow rate. And if your flow rates are off, then you turn a couple dials, you check your EC, and you can adjust from that, right? So I can successfully, long story short, I can successfully operate with a dosatron at any flow rate, given I have, you know, the bare minimum. With the Editron, it's speaking to flow sensors. So it's picking up the flow that's coming in and making its adjustments clicks per second based off of the flow that's coming in. It's not like a volumetric thing where it's like, hey, you need to be at this many pounds of pressure for it to work, where it's X mils per gallon actually equals that. It's based off of your flow coming in. So say if you got a dual dab for trying to mix the tanks a little bit quicker, trying to fill tanks quicker, and one of them goes out, right? It's going to make that adjustment, and you're not going to be fucked at the end of it. It's just going to take longer, so it has kind of that safety buffer. On top of that, man, you can get so tricky with this thing, and every single shutoff valve, like anything, right? Safety precaution across the board on your facility, overflow ports, things of that nature, where like it'll send you an alarm, it'll shut a master valve off, right? If a solenoid kicks open, it will measure its rates, and it's like, hey, you called for 1,000 gallons of water, and it takes this long with the flow rate that we've been filling at. It's been running for longer. It's going to shut off just based off knowing that it's you know, your flow sensor in the tank has failed potentially.
Yep. Yeah.
So
amazing.
redundancies, man.
Yeah.
Something that-
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah, it's all Roach is switching to. They're putting Editrons. They're putting dilution solution everywhere.
Yep.
Chris is a smart guy.
Yeah, he's a smart. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing. He definitely
Yeah,
knows what
he
he's doing.
does for sure. Cool guys. I really appreciate you guys making the trip out.
taking the time out for sure. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys. Appreciate the support. Looking forward to like continuing this partnership we got going on.
Yeah.
And can't thank you guys enough for just being solid cats that, you know, do what you say you're going to do in a world full of bullshit, smoke and mirrors. It's nice to, you know, be aligned with people who are vibing like us. So
Thanks,
anyways,
Charlie.
Like-minded.
Appreciate
you
that.
guys. Yeah,
Appreciate you.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you having us out.
Appreciate you.
Always.
All right. Wrap it up.
Wrap.
That was sick.
Yeah,
That was dope.
that was fun. Thank you guys.
Yeah.